There is a white powder sitting in your kitchen right now. You probably walked past it this morning without a second thought. Maybe you scooped some into your coffee, stirred it once, and moved on. The whole thing took 3 seconds, and it felt like absolutely nothing. Just another reflex built into a Tuesday morning. But here is what is strange about that moment. The instant that sweetness hit your tongue, something ancient woke up inside you. Not ancient like your grandparents. Not ancient like ancient Rome. Ancient like before there were continents shaped the way they are now. The craving that made you reach for that spoon is older than your species by tens of millions of years. And the story of how it got there, inside your biology, inside your kitchen, is one of the most surprising stories in human history. It does not begin with a sugar plantation or a candy factory. It does not even begin with a human. It begins in a forest that no longer exists, in a place that no longer looks anything like it did. 30 million years ago, the land we now call Egypt was not desert. It was dense, wet, warm woodland, thick with canopy and dripping with seasonal fruit. And moving through those trees was a small primate, not a monkey, not an ape, but the ancestor of both. Every morning, this animal faced a choice. On one side, hard nuts and seeds, locked inside shells, requiring effort, offering slow energy. On the other side, soft, ripe fruit, practically offering itself, packed with sugar the body could burn in minutes. That choice does not sound dramatic. But across millions of generations, it shaped everything. Animals that chose ripe fruit that felt drawn toward sweetness had a faster, more efficient energy source. They moved quicker. They found food before competitors. They survived more winters. The ones with the sharpest hunger for sweetness passed that hunger down and down and down, across 30 million years of lineage until it arrived in you. We know this not from a written record, but from something more honest than language. Teeth. Fossilized teeth found in a place in Egypt called the Fayum Depression. This basin is one of the richest early primate fossil sites on Earth. The sediment there preserved bones from dozens of species that lived between 29 and 40 million years ago. A research team led by dental anthropologist Ian Towell, alongside Matthew Borths and Carolina Locke, examined 421 fossilized teeth. These belong to 5 different genera of early anthropoids, the group that would eventually become every monkey, ape, and human alive today. The team was scanning for 2 specific things: chips and cavities. Chips appear when an animal regularly bites into something hard: shells, seeds, bone. Cavities appear when an animal regularly eats something soft and sugary, leaving residue that bacteria can feed on. The results were striking. Only around 5% of the teeth showed any chipping at all. That is dramatically low compared to primates that crack hard foods today. But the cavity patterns told a clear story. These animals were eating soft, sugary fruit and eating a lot of it. Ian Towell summed it up plainly. The evidence points toward a consistent preference for ripe, sugar-rich food sources. That is not a footnote. That is the foundation of something you carry in your body right now. There is a gene called TAS1R2 that controls sweet taste detection. It is present across the entire primate family tree. It did not appear randomly. It was shaped over millions of years by exactly the dietary pressure those ancient teeth are recording. If you have ever enjoyed something sweet and you have, that gene is part of why. Before we go further, if this kind of deep history storytelling is what you come here for, take a second and hit like and subscribe. It helps this channel more than you might think, and it means you won't miss what's coming next. Now, here is where the popular story gets it backwards. Most people picture our ancestors as lean, tough, primarily meat-focused survivors. Sugar gets cast as the soft modern thing, something weak and indulgent, layered on top of a disciplined ancient body. The fossil record says almost exactly the opposite. Soft, ripe fruit may have been the foundational diet of the primate lineage for most of its existence. The craving for sweetness is not a weakness bolted onto ancient discipline. It is one of the oldest survival instincts the primate body possesses. Of course, the fruit was never guaranteed. Fruiting seasons are unpredictable. Trees ripen at different times. A dozen species competed for the same branches. Birds, insects, rival primates. All racing toward the same narrow window before the sugar peaked and the fruit dropped. An animal with a strong drive toward sweetness had a competitive edge, but only if it moved fast enough to claim the prize. That pressure followed our lineage as it evolved. As hominins emerged in Africa, they encountered something that went even further than ripe fruit. Something that concentrated natural sugar into a substance so potent, so dense with calories, that it was worth risking serious injury to obtain. Honey. A single kilogram of wild honey contains roughly 3,000 calories. That is an extraordinary energy payload for an animal that might otherwise spend an entire day foraging for scattered fruit and roots. But to get it, you had to go through the bees. Thousands of them, capable of stinging repeatedly. Guarding a nest they would defend to the last. No written record tells us when the first human being decided that trade was worth making. But we have something almost as vivid. On a rock wall in the Valencia region of eastern Spain, inside a site now called the Cueva de la Araña, the Cave of the Spider, there is a painting. It shows a human figure, suspended in the air, clinging to what appears to be a rope or vine ladder. The figure is reaching into a crevice in the rock. Around the opening, a cluster of bees swarms. In one hand, the figure appears to be holding a container already partially filled. This painting is widely considered the oldest surviving image of humans deliberately harvesting honey anywhere on Earth. Estimated age, somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years old, though dating this style of cave art remains genuinely difficult. But the scene does not need a date to make its point. Someone climbed to a dangerous height above a fall that could have killed them, surrounded by stinging insects, for sugar, not for survival, not because there was nothing else to eat, because the reward, that dense, sweet, almost overwhelming hit of concentrated energy, was worth the cost. This is the piece of the story that modern life has completely erased. For the vast majority of human history, sweetness was not available. It was earned. You did not eat sugar every morning. You encountered it a handful of times a year if you were skilled and lucky. The craving existed. The supply almost never matched it. If this story is landing for you the way it's landing for us, share it with someone and make sure you're subscribed. We put out new videos every week on exactly this kind of thing. Ancient behavior, modern biology, the gap between the world we were built for and the one we actually live in. Now, let's talk about the moment everything started to change. The highlands of New Guinea, roughly 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. A wild grass called Saccharum robustum grew in dense thickets across the wet lowlands and slopes. At some point, exactly when is unclear, because tropical soil destroys organic remains quickly, people began cultivating it intentionally. A major genomic study published in 2025, tracing the ancestry of hundreds of modern sugarcane varieties, confirmed this region as the definitive origin point. But here is what that domestication actually looked like. Nothing like what we imagine. There were no mills, no refineries, no white powder. People grew the cane to feed their pigs and to chew the stalks raw, sucking out the juice and spitting the fiber onto the ground. That was it. Sugarcane as a plant you put in your mouth and squeezed. Some communities in the region were still using it exactly that way well into the 20th century. The transformation from plant you chew to commodity that reshapes civilizations had not yet begun. That transformation happened thousands of kilometers away, in India. At some point, historians debate whether this was the 5th century BCE or as late as the Gupta period around the 4th century CE. Someone in the Indian subcontinent worked out a process. Boil the cane juice down. Cool it carefully. Stir it as it thickens. Under the right conditions, it crystallizes, transforms from a perishable liquid into solid, stable, storable granules. What had been a juice that spoiled within hours was now a dry, transportable substance that could survive months of travel. The Sanskrit word for this new material was sharkara, meaning grit or gravel. It is the direct etymological root of the English word sugar, and once it existed in solid form, it started moving. By approximately 500 BCE, knowledge of processed sugarcane was reaching southern China via maritime trade. In the 7th century CE, the Tang Emperor Taizong sent a dedicated diplomatic mission to India with one specific goal: to learn the crystallization technique firsthand. Chinese records from this period describe the envoy's journey in detail, and the method they brought back transformed Chinese food production within a generation. Westward, Arab traders carried refined sugar into Persia and across the broader Islamic world. It arrived in medieval Europe as a rarity, priced like a spice, stored like a medicine, prescribed by physicians for digestion, melancholy, and fevers. For centuries across Europe, refined sugar was less a food than a luxury object. It appeared at the tables of kings and bishops, carved into elaborate sculptures called subtleties that were displayed before being eaten. The less wealthy used it in small medicinal quantities, if at all. For most of human history, even after crystallization was discovered, sugar remained governed by scarcity. And that scarcity left a record in the bodies of the people who lived under it, specifically in their teeth. Across multiple bioarchaeological studies, researchers comparing farming and hunter-gatherer populations found rising rates of dental cavities as agriculture spread. The mechanism makes sense. Starchy grain, once broken down in the mouth, releases fermentable sugars that feed cavity-causing bacteria just as efficiently as fruit sugar does. But a careful 2019 reanalysis, published in Current Anthropology, complicated this picture. When researchers looked closely at the data, they found that caries rates between farmers and hunter-gatherers overlapped by more than 70%. Climate, it turned out, independently affected oral health in ways that sometimes rivaled diet entirely. The clean story, pristine hunter-gatherer teeth giving way to rotten farmer teeth, is real in rough aggregate, but far messier in the actual evidence. Even the most repeated claims about sugar in human history turn out to be more complicated than the popular version suggests. So if farming's effect on oral health was real but limited, what caused the dramatic collapse in dental health that defines the modern mouth? The answer came from an elegant piece of research published in 2013. Before we get to it, this is the third time I'll ask, and I'll keep it short. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and share it with someone this would surprise. Now, the research team, led by geneticist Christina Adler, did something unusual. They examined calcified dental plaque, hardened mineral called calculus, from 34 European skeletons spanning roughly 7,500 years of history. Inside that calculus, preserved in mineral form, was ancient bacterial DNA. A frozen record of the microbial communities that had lived in those people's mouths. What they found was counterintuitive in the best way. The shift to farming did produce a measurable change in oral bacteria, but a comparatively modest one. The real disruption came later, much later. In the window of the Industrial Revolution, barely 2 centuries ago, the bacterial communities inside human mouths changed more dramatically than they had in the previous 8,000 years combined. The cavity-causing bacteria, now considered normal in the modern human mouth, became dominant for the first time in recorded history during the 1700s and 1800s. Not during the invention of agriculture, not during the rise of cities, during the age of factories and steamships and colonial trade. What happened was simple supply. Sugar production industrialized. The Caribbean plantation system, built on the forced labor of enslaved Africans, one of the largest and most brutal economic structures in human history, generated sugar in quantities that earlier centuries could not have conceived of. Anthropologist Sidney Mintz tracked what that looked like in Britain with a single statistic. In 1700, the average British person consumed around 4 pounds of sugar per year. By 1800, that number had risen to roughly 18 pounds, a 4-fold increase in 1 century. By the early 20th century, it was approaching 90 pounds per year and climbing. The same trajectory with varying timing spread across the industrializing world. Sugar was no longer rare. It was cheap, abundant, shelf-stable, and available every single day of the year. And a biology built across 30 million years of scarcity was suddenly handed exactly what it had always been searching for, with no limit attached. That is the real rupture in this story. Not the first ancient primate that chose a ripe fig over a hard seed. Not the person who climbed toward a wild hive in the Spanish hills. Not even the Indian technician who first coaxed boiling cane juice into solid crystals. The rupture is barely 200 years old. The moment a craving that evolved for scarcity encountered unlimited supply for the first time in the history of the primate lineage. And your body, your biology, has not caught up. It was designed for a world where sweetness was a rare signal of something genuinely valuable. Fast energy, ripe nutrition, a lucky find in a competitive forest. Every mechanism that makes you reach for more, the pleasure response, the craving that doesn't fully satisfy, the sense that one bite is never quite enough, was built for a context where you might not encounter that sweetness again for weeks. None of those mechanisms were updated when the context changed. The cavities, the bottomless cravings, the metabolic consequences of a diet saturated with refined sugar. These are not signs of personal failure. They are the predictable output of ancient hardware running in an environment it was never designed to face. Your willpower is not the problem. The mismatch is the problem. And the mismatch has a very precise starting point. The moment cheap industrial sugar arrived at the scale that colonial plantation labor made possible. Which brings you back to the kitchen. The spoon. The cup. That small gesture, so ordinary it barely registers, is the final link in a chain that runs back 30 million years, through Fayum forests and Egyptian fossil beds, through a painted cave in Valencia and a highland river in New Guinea, through Sanskrit manuscripts and Tang Dynasty diplomatic missions, through Caribbean plantations and industrial refineries and container ships. All of it, every step of that journey, was moving toward this moment. A craving older than the human species, finally given exactly what it always wanted, at a price that makes it effortless. The ease is the newest thing in the room. Everything else, the hunger, the pleasure, the want, has been there since long before there were humans to feel it. If you watch this far, you already know this channel is for you. We make this kind of video every week. History told through biology, behavior examined through evidence, the ancient made visible in the ordinary. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this if it changed how you see something. And we'll see you in the next one.